Hello and welcome to another episode of Second Impressions, the Estound's web series where we discuss marketing questions we receive from viewers like yourself. I'm Trevor Heaton, and I've got my colleagues and marketing experts Greg Bond and Erik Wolf with me back again. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Hey.
Oh, hey.
Oh, pop up Greg.
Oh, the elevator stops at this floor.
Hey, guys. All right. So this week, we got a question from Matt B. He's a CEO. And his question is, my startup goals are ambitious. How do I get my marketing to work to my advantage when we are doing something totally different and new in the communication industry?
Oh, man.
Sounds
so
like
it's
a startup.
Is that all they had? That is as open-ended as they get. But it's funny, like this is something we hear from a lot of people is basically we're in what is seemingly a traditional industry. We're doing something completely new and different, creating our own category, and we want to get huge. Like, what do we do?
How everybody is new and different.
Yeah, everybody is. And everybody in communications does something completely different too. Like I've almost never talked to anyone who does the same thing. They're all unique. Everybody in communications is like a snowflake. So this is definitely something that gets our wheels turning a little bit, because I have to kind of specify. So if you have startup goals that are ambitious, a large part of this means growing fast, and marketing is an end-to-many endeavor versus something like sales, which is an end-to-one. And so we do know that there's going to be some sort of focus on marketing. The question is, what levers are we needing to pull? And then when I hear the word startup, 9 times out of 10, what it means is if these people are doing something different, it's a new category. And so the hardest part is the knowledge gap. So somehow overcoming an industry's awareness that you exist and connecting that to value that you could provide, which is a heavy pull. If you want to grow fast, having to educate everybody is a really tough thing to do at the same time, because often you have to educate people first. And by default, when you do that, you're increasing the time that your sales cycle is going to take.
And you have to educate them twice, because if we truly are a new and different, completely off the wall thing that nobody's ever heard of before, we've got to do 2 jobs. We've got to, number one, tell them that we are doing this new job that you haven't heard of before, but you undoubtedly would love to have somebody doing for you. But then number 2, we have to establish the fact that not only does this exist and is this important, but that we're the folks that you want to have doing that for you. And so it becomes marketing sort of has to do 2 things at once, which is definitely difficult.
Yeah. And then the 2 things, because before you could close any sales, you're not just having to drive awareness and making sure people know you exist, but then you have to keep them engaged. And that's what helps them understand what your value is. And then when they're in the position of needing something in an area where you provide that value, then they're going to have the ability to go through a process towards sales. And then it could become more end-to-one in focus. And so you have 2 things you have to do, and that's a long road to go down, especially for a startup who's often going to be focused on one of the things that people are investing in as a startup is the acquisition and nailing down what that cost of acquisition is. And so if you're having to drive awareness and then engagement towards the sale, what you're doing is the most inefficient version of marketing, which is going to drive up your cost of an acquisition really high, especially at the beginning. Your initial acquisition costs will be extremely high. And so that's when it helps why so many startups are constantly trying to figure out ways to partner with bigger bigger organizations and bigger names and so on, so that they could piggyback off of the recognition that these other businesses have as a way of kind of shortcutting that. But it doesn't work terribly well. So like, I would say, I don't know how ambitious your goals are, but knowing that you're going to have to drive that awareness and engagement, it may help to start off with very conservative goals and then make them grow over time. Because if people start to understand this value, it is as disruptive and innovative as you think it is, then those successes will grow exponentially. But just knowing that you have to get over the hump with those first successes, that's going to be a really hard road to go down. And that's where you should focus all your attention. So CEOs that are in startups are almost always focused on that big picture of success and how important and useful their stuff is. But I would say, just like your question, let's get more focused and figure out what needs to be done on like a playbook level, so that you could get those first successes in and then figure out how to amplify those.
What does the road to success really look like? And unfortunately, it's fairly difficult to start with a new company in a new category. And of course, you want to show that you've got traction. You want to show that you've got sales. You're very often looking towards whatever that next round of investment is. And so it's really hard to focus on the parts of the story that don't necessarily directly get you right to where you want to be. You've really got to focus on sort of the softer stuff. You've got to, it's going to be difficult to get enough traction at the beginning to really impress investors with those individual sales. That's what we talk about, N equals many, N equals one. And essentially what that means is that we talk about marketing as being involved in every transaction and sales being involved in each transaction. When marketing is working, marketing is most effective when it's your company broadcasting a message towards a big group. Whereas with sales, every sale is by its nature a one-to-one activity. And so marketing looks at the forest, sales looks at the trees, and both things are equally important. But if we don't figure out where our forest is, we're never going to get to the point of figuring out which trees are ours.
People are often pretty good about the end of one situation because it's more personalized. It's more visceral. We see it, we experience it, and we have people in front of us. And so that one-to-one communication comes naturally to a lot of people. And it's partly, I believe, the reason why we see so many startups are laser focused on continuing investments, is because they realize that they know how to sell to investors. And so investors become their actual clients, and they're not as focused on the marketplace and figuring out exactly how they're going to, get that traction and scale ultimately with a marketplace that finds them useful. And that's partly why we see so many startups that get tons of investments and never really carve out a niche in the marketplace to drive sustainable long-term success. And so that's been like kind of a catch for us, where as an outside vendor, we have to screen those types of people out. We have to understand, like, when we're being brought into those situations where somebody might be, what is it, like a very motivated CEO. They're very into their stuff, but at the same time, it's our job to figure out what that end of many situation looks like. And if we can't deduce what that is from what we hear from an executive, then for us, that's a big red flag.
Right. So he would need to start looking at the strategy and tactics. He wants to know how he can use marketing to his advantage. And my first thought was, what are the different outcomes in marketing?
So we believe that whenever you're working in marketing, you're working at that one of four goals. And those goals are awareness, Do you know who I am? Do you know what I do? Engagement. Are you interested in what I do? How can I show you that the thing that you're looking for and the thing that I do are closely matched? Sales, driving sales, and that's the part where we get into that n=1 situation where there are meetings happening. They have a sales rep. We have a proposal. We're trying to get you to sign off, and then retention is the fourth one. And so, really, when you're doing this effort, the thing that everybody focuses on is sales, but that awareness is really, really important. This is why people talk about a first mover advantage. That the first mover advantage is actually very rarely an advantage. In most cases, the first movers fail. Apple did not create the first MP3 player, and that's something that a lot of people don't remember, is that this was a thing that was around, and that people, but it took Apple not only improving the product, but actually building the rest of the infrastructure and using everything that they had behind them in order to make MP3s a viable way to buy and listen to music and consume music. So if you're going to be a first mover and you want to have that advantage, you need to be careful to make sure that you're just not spending a lot of money to queue up a good idea that somebody else is going to be able to essentially take from you. Nobody remembers any of the MP3 players that came before the iPod. And if Matt wants to make sure that what he's building in this new and different way is going to be memorable and is going to make a difference, there's got to be a plan for that. And scoring one and two sales wins isn't going to accomplish that. That's not going to make this business sustainable, especially when the category is new.
Right. So, Greg, would you recommend he start out with awareness?
I would recommend looking at the bigger picture of how they imagine their business to be within that segment or industry. I think too many people start businesses because they have a technology or a programmer or a developer that has something, and then what they do is they try to find, they believe there's a marketplace for that thing that they already developed, instead of starting with the customer and going from there. So it's like, what do you really think this is going to be to a customer? Because in communications and security and a lot of these digital service offerings, these people end up being just features, not actual platforms in these like ecosystems that are often what people seek out, versus having, nobody wanted an MP3 file. What they wanted was music in their ears. And there's a lot of different ways of putting together a flow to make that occur. And so to me, it's about thinking through that entire experience versus just the thing you have.
Yeah, the ability to compress an audio file into an MP3 isn't sexy at all.
Right.
But that's what a lot of people thought that they were doing. Like, oh no, you can fit, look how many you can do. But the idea with that this is an ecosystem and that you're going to have 1,000 songs in your pocket, that was more of the difference maker. And I know this is only one example, but you really have to focus on what matters to the customer and why your product is important in the first place. And that's typically a discussion that gets had before marketing gets involved. But it's a really, really crucial discussion, and it's going to define everything from here on out.
Right. I mean, obviously this question could be a whole seminar, right?
Yeah.
We could discuss this for days, but I think that's a really good explanation. I think it's really good information for Matt to get started. So any final thoughts?
I'm good on my end. I feel like this, otherwise we might open up a Russian doll.
Right. All right, Matt B. I
Good
hope.
luck to Matt.
What's that?
Good luck to Matt.
Yeah, Matt, hope we answered your question. If we didn't, feel free to message us back. We're glad to carry this conversation on. That does conclude this session. That Mickey Mouse clock on Erik's wall says that's all. So if you have a question that you would like answered, email us at Second Impressions right there at the bottom of the page, and we're glad to answer your question. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.